Hello and welcome to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about pop culture and the world around it. I'm Nick.
And I'm Alistair.
And this fortnight, we will be discussing Spider-Man Far From Home, the third in our trilogy of Marvel-related episode, and also, coincidentally, the third out of 3 films coming out this year from the MCU. And then, after we've dealt with that, we'll be taking another great big look back, similar to last week with Netflix, as we ask, Marvel Phase 3. Did they nail it? But before we get on to these big, broad, existential questions, Alistair, what have you consumed lately?
Well, I've been watching Dark Season 2. This is a really interesting science fiction show on Netflix. It's Netflix's first German language TV show, and it's set in a small town in Germany where there's this sort of strange goings-on involving time travel. The first series is very much a sort of small town drama, and it starts in 2019, and the time travel elements allow people to travel, or some characters to travel to 1986 and to 1953, and you get kind of different stories evolving at different points, and you find out more about these characters, and their lives. Like, for example, you find out that there's a policeman in 2019 who was a rebellious teenager who had a very confrontational relationship with the police when he was young in 1986. In other things, you find the old policeman that this guy is rebelling against. In the 80s, you see his story when he became a policeman in the 1950s and so on. And the first series is kind of weaves this kind of complex story together involving various people popping in and out of time. And there's a sense of something bigger, more mysterious going on in the background. The second series dives much more in this like full-on science fiction. There's mysterious time-traveling people. They go 30 years in the future where there's been some kind of apocalypse and some sort of war being fought over the sort of charred remains of planet Earth. There's a sort of mysterious group of possibly evil time-traveling cult type thing. So the second series definitely broadens out the mythos and also crucially does provide some explanation into what Earth is going on. It's still got some of the other character drama stuff and this thing about all these different people's lives and how they've lived over time. But the second series dives more into the sci-fi plot, but it does actually, when it gets going, there are some really good twists. So it's worth sticking with it.
Yeah, I think you've recommended this once before, and since then it does seem to have really taken off and become a bit of a thing on my sort of TV liking Twitter feed. This has been one of the shows I've seen sort of recommended, and oh my god, you have to check this out the most in the last few months, probably since they released season 2.
Yeah, I did the recommendation earlier this year because
You were in before it was cool.
Yeah.
That's what we need to know.
That's preserving my reviewer credos. I was there before season 2 dropped.
Yeah, you were definitely the first person I saw mentioning this, or to mention this to me or anything. Whereas now I see at least someone go, oh my god, I'm watching Dark at least once a day or something.
Yeah, the second series really has taken it up another level. If you liked Primer, it's kind of like that in that it's more about especially the first series, more about what are the real world implications of if time travel was possible. Such as a kid at school discovers that the girl he's dating is actually his aunt. Second time this year that twist has been done. Things like that. So the first one is more, it's kind of like Prime in that sense of what if time travel is real? But then I guess in the second series they go to what if time travel is real and some people were abusing its power for their own end? Would they form weird time traveling mystic cults who are kind of behind things at every turn? I know it gets a bit more arch sci-fi in the second series, but it is because they've done all that work laying the groundwork with these really complex characters, means that the second series can kind of have detailed characterization and a complex time travel plot that's spread over about 120 years.
Okay, and there's no sign of it yet disappearing up its own bum.
It depends really on your mileage for, I guess, strange, mysterious time travel cults. It does crucially build up mysteries and sort of resolve and explain them, unlike the much maligned on this podcast Lost, that just seemed to pile mystery on top of mystery and there was never any explanation. If you're kind of wondering I'm enjoying this, but I'm worried it's just all going to be smoke and mirrors, or the answers are going to be disappointing, it does actually deliver some good explanation when it kind of reveals what the deal is.
And the one bit of information I have absorbed about this from the geek media, trying as I am not to read too much about it to avoid spoilers, is that it's finishing next year with season 3. So at the very least, it's not going to bang on for dozens of episodes, getting increasingly stupid and impenetrable.
Yeah, and it's only 8 episode series as well, so that means it'll be 24 episodes in total, which I think is probably a decent run for something like this. There's enough space there to do some good character story and have a good arc.
Yeah, no, it sounds like some good compact fun. I just need to decide whether to start watching it now or to wait 6 months or so in the hope that I can just burn through the whole 24 episodes in one big lot. But yeah, it sounds like I'm probably going to watch it at some point. It seems to be sufficiently acclaimed at this stage to justify me spending some time on it.
Yeah.
Even if it does involve making the effort to concentrate on subtitles.
Which I'm actually enjoying because I finally found something that means I can put my phone away and just concentrate on the TV.
The addiction approach of I just need someone to make me do it.
I finally cracked the smartphone habit.
For an hour or so at a time at least.
Anyway, Nick, what have you been up to since we last spoke?
I too have been watching a recent-ish TV show, which I've seen get some praise on Twitter, though not quite as much as Dark. This is Barry, a sitcom which is, I think, on HBO in America and on Sky Atlantic here. It's basically about a hitman who's getting a bit disillusioned with the hitman life. Comes to Los Angeles on a job and due to a series of unfortunate coincidences ends up joining an acting class, decides he likes it and wants to become an actor, but predictably it's harder than he hoped to extricate himself from that hitman life. So he keeps, getting dragged back into doing murders and stuff, whilst also learning acting. And also he's not actually very good at acting. Although I'm interested to see if his journey over the show is going to be him becoming good at acting, or just him continuing to suck at acting until he actually gets murdered or something. I'm not sure.
That sounds like a great premise for a comedy show. It does actually sound there's plenty of potential for funny pratfalls.
Yeah, it's a combination of the funny pratfalls and it's a dark comedy, so, there's lots of silliness and ridiculous moments with him sort of tiptoeing around the horrific murders he's committed whilst trying to memorise his scenes or whatever. And also there's enough sort of serious dark material about, how grim the actual murders are and how increasingly tormented he is by the emptiness of his life and the extent to which his entire existence is just murder, murder, murder. It is, to evoke Dexter for the second time in 2 episodes, it is kind of Dextery, except so far it feels like it has a lot more of a healthy sense of its own ludicrousness, whereas Dexter, I think, ended up taking itself a bit too seriously.
Yeah, but it's played as a comedy, though.
It's, as I say, it's a sort of dark comedy. A lot of the beats are quite funny, but there is definitely a certain tragedy to poor doomed Barry who just wants to be an actor and is clearly going to struggle to get away from the amount of times he's spent killing people.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's going to have a happy ending.
Yeah, that does sound really funny. Yeah. I do like this sort of show where someone's trying to grow as a person, they're trying to leave their old life behind, but it just refuses to let them. That's whatever that is, and the fact that it's being a hitman, I guess, is not the sort of thing you can easily walk away from. It's not like, I don't know, working in a call centre. Yeah,
it proves difficult, and he's got this same sort of slightly weird blank energy that Michael C. Hall has as Dexter. Again, he looks a bit like him. I don't know if that's just what TV has decided that murderers look like. This sort of handsome, if in a very, very bland way, sort of square-faced guy.
They're aiming for, when people say, how could it be him? He's just so normal.
Yeah, he's still good-looking enough to be on TV, but not in a male model way, just in a very, very handsome-ish normal guy way, is the way they've styled it. But yeah, it's starring one of the creators, a guy called Bill Hader, who sounds familiar, but I'm not sure what else I've seen him in. But he's really, really good in this, and yeah, it's a really, really enjoyable show.
All right. I know, I've not heard of him as well.
But yeah, there are 2 seasons of Barry, although annoyingly only one of them is up on Sky Atlantic, so I'll be taking a short break after this. But they're only 8 half-hour episodes, and yeah.
Yeah, it's always good to find new sitcom recommendations, actually, yeah. Yeah, I've been watching rewatching some classic British sitcoms on Netflix, but actually I probably should dive into something new. I've just seen, actually, the guy's, Bill Hader's Wikipedia page. He seems to mainly do voices for animated shows. He was in Ice Age, he was in Venture Brothers. He's been in 30 Rock as well.
It looks like he was a Saturday Night Live guy as a comedian.
Yeah.
And I guess he might lend itself a bit to doing voice work and now dark comedies about assassins.
First up this episode, we'll be reviewing Spider-Man Far From Home, the sequel to 2017's Spider-Man Homecoming, and the final film in Phase 3 of Marvel's Cinematic Universe. Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man, is hoping for a summer vacation away from being a superhero on his school science trip to Europe. His plan is to spend some time with MJ, the girl he has a crush on. However, this plan goes awry when Nick Fury attempts to contact Peter, a water monster attacks Venice, and a strange new superhero called Mysterio turns up to save the day. We saw this film recently, so Nick, as our resident Spider-Man superfan, what did you think of it?
Yeah, shocking no one. I really enjoyed this. Possibly in the grand rankings, not quite as much as Homecoming, because I think they tilted it slightly towards the sort of Marvel Universe superhero stuff, which took a little bit of time away from the school material I really loved in Homecoming. But there's still so much school comedy in this, but I can't really complain that they're not doing that. So, yeah, I thought this was really fun. I like that they fully committed to Mysterio. I'm genuinely thrilled that we're 2 films into a new Spider-Man franchise, and we haven't yet just collapsed into recycling the Goblins, the Venom Carnage symbiotes, and Dr. Octopus yet again. I'm glad we're diving a bit into the Rogues Gallery, and we're actually making an effort to do things with them and make them seem cool, rather than just treating them like disposable goons. I'm still very much on board with Tom Holland's relatable, fallible, earnest display as Peter. I think he's, as always seems to happen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, amazing casting, and I'm very happy to see him continuing to do this. And I really like the cast of kids they've built up around him. I think Zendaya, especially as MJ, does do a lot to really make her character work in a Marvel Cinematic Universe that is cluttered with the used up husks of really boring love interests. And she does do a great job of always reliably being the most entertaining thing in a lot of her scenes and actually holding her own without them just taking the lazy shortcut of giving her powers or whatever. So yeah, I think they did a lot of enjoyable superhero stuff. There's a lot of good school stuff. Tom Holland himself is still incredibly charming. Some good Jake Gyllenhaal. I guess we won't spoil the big twist in the plot yet, just in case people don't want it spoiled. Although it would have been quite a while since it came out by the time we finally released this episode. But yeah, Spider-Man Far From Home. I liked it. I don't know what the status of the Marvel Sony negotiations horseshit is, but I hope we get at least one more of these to complete the trilogy.
There's a good post-credit sequence. We're sticking right to the end of the credits for this one, because there's definitely some good setup for a future Spider-Man movie. So if they don't make the film they set up with this film, then I will be surely disappointed.
Yeah, there's definitely a very firm cliffhanger. Oh my god, what's going to happen next? Throws a sequel at the end of this. So it would be a bit weird if I don't think they're probably going to make a sequel.
But anyway, that's enough discussion of the end of the film. To drag it back to, well, the whole of the film. I liked it. I thought it was funny. Yeah, I agree with all you've just said. They haven't retrodden the ground that's been trodden quite well by first Sam Raimi and then the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man films. I think what makes this film good, as well as it just being generally funny, and as you say, Tom Holland had been good, is having Samuel Jackson in it really helped. I mean, he's got real charisma. He's a brilliant movie star. You know, obviously, Nick Fury always brings this sense of like tension into it because he's obviously one of the big badasses. Yeah, having him in the film was like, you know, I guess also kind of helped it bring it more into the Marvel cinematic continuum, in that Nick Fury seems to be the point that links up lots of films. And also, yeah, the addition of Jake Gyllenhaal, who's great. I mean, he's a big star in his own right. Mysterio, I thought, was an interesting character. I'm not sure how faithful to the Mysterio in the comics they were, but what they did with him in this film, and I'm going to dance around spoiling anything, we might do a full spoiler chat later on, but I thought what they did in this film was really worked well with the plot and what they wanted to do. I don't know if they chose Mysterio as a villain because he's less well known than the Green Goblin, Dr. Octopus or Venom. So because he's less well known, they can change the character a bit more to suit what they want to do.
I think in the comics, Mysterio is generally more a Hollywood special effects guy than a scientist guy.
Yeah.
Apart from that, the general demeanour and shtick is actually quite faithful.
Yeah, okay. But then in that case, they chose someone who really works well with the story, because one of the main themes is heavy lies the mantle in that. Okay, so do we do spoilers for Endgame?
I think we can definitely spoil Endgame at this point.
Okay, so obviously, following on from the death of Iron Man, Tony Stark in Endgame, the kind of technological mantle of Stark Empire is sort of being passed to Peter as the adopted son of Tony, and in the form of a pair of glasses that used to belong to Tony that Peter has inherited, that also gives him access to like this global spanning weapon system and lots of Stark tech. And Peter doesn't want it. He wants to be a kid. He wants to go on his summer holiday with the girl he's got a crush on and hang out with his friend and just be a normal kid. And you really empathise with that in this film. They really get across this whole, I don't want to be a grown-up, enjoy life while you're young sort of thing. And, you know, he didn't ask for any of this to happen to him. There's quite a really good like dynamic at the core of this film. Of some levels, Peter has to grow up and, you know, become worthy of the mantle he's inheriting, but at the same time you feel, but yeah, he's a kid, he should have some time to be a kid.
Yeah, every so often I thought, is this sort of, when are you going to step up, Peter? Stuff got a bit overplayed because, yes, as you say, the plot does kind of acknowledge it, but he is still only meant to be about 16 in plot, I think. It's a bit weird to be sort of, someone needs to be the greatest superhero on Earth. Will it be you, child who hasn't yet reached GCSE age? And it's like, oh god. It's a valid thing for Peter to angst about because it's the sort of thing that someone as neurotic as him probably would angst about. But on the other hand, it's weird that every so often the so-called adults seem to kind of lean into it as well, as if it's actually a valid thing for him to really angst about.
I guess they're showing the fact that every other character or like hero in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is kind of permanently lives in that world though. And Peter is a character who actually, one of the few characters who has one foot in the superhero world and one in the real world. He has a secret identity. He does have dual lives, unlike Captain America, Iron Man, Black Panther, the rest. And maybe they're trying to say something about how these people have, to some degree, they've lost touch with reality. They just all superhero stuff all the time. And obviously, if defending the Earth was your job, it would consume your whole life. And there's an element of they don't understand what real life is like anymore because they've been doing this for so long. But Peter's kind of desperately trying to cling to something vaguely normal.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the big appeal of these films. It's always weird that they've taken this long and this many Marvel Cinematic Universe things to really dig into this aspect of it. But yeah, what it's like to be a regular person amongst all this sort of superhero crap. Like the second film in this franchise, and as well as the hero dealing with it a lot, both of the villains have dealt quite heavily with how does the influx of weird superhero stuff into every aspect of this universe affect, the little guy.
Yeah.
So like Venom and Mysterio are both, to differing degrees, dealing with that. And I thought it was clever to tie Mysterio into that, as well as continuing to do it with Peter.
You said Venom, do you mean Vulture?
I probably did mean Vulture, yes.
Yeah, I thought Jake Gyllenhaal was excellent. Do we want to do anything on spoilery stuff?
I think at this point we might as well. So yeah, if you haven't seen Spider-Man Far From Home and you're not familiar enough with the comics to know roughly what most Mysterio storylines end up being, and you care about having the basic thrust of this film spoiled for you, then here it is. Last chance to run. Cool, so, shocking no one, the guy they cast as the villain in this Spider-Man film turns out to be a villain.
Yeah, and the highest profile star they've added to the cast is the main villain.
Alarming, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, the water monster they fight, I mean, they're called the elementals. There's like a water monster, a fire monster, and a sort of wind monster. They fight at different points. I mean, they are pretty personality-less villains. They are just literally blobs of matter for Mysterio and Spider-Man to punch. It will surprise no one that actually these personality-less voids that are just filled with action spectacle are not the main villain of this film. The main villain of this film is the character played by a high-level actor that Peter Parker has a relationship with. I think, as we said before, what makes Spider-Man work so well is that the villains Spider-Man faces off with, Spider-Man or Peter Parker usually has a personal relationship with the person behind the mask. Dr. Octopus is his mentor, at least in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films. He's his sort of tutor and mentor. Green Goblin is his best friend. Venom is supposed to be stuck to one of his friends or rivals. The Vulture obviously is the dad of the girl he's into in the first film. And then, the other person that Peter develops a substantial relationship with in this film on a personal level, funnily enough, turns out to be the big villain.
Yeah. Peter does have a bad habit of picking, or, attaching himself to possible substitute father figures and then them turning out to be bad guys. And yes, that pretty much happens again here. It is one of the main ways in which they have kind of changed Mysterio, in a similar way to how they changed the Vulture, in that Peter's personal relationship with them as Peter wasn't as pronounced in the comics. They were just people he encountered as villains a lot of the time. But, I can see how it makes it seem a bit more personal. And, when they're the main villain of the whole film, you probably kind of have to do that. And it's not as if they, do something ridiculous where they insert him into Peter's past to some ludicrous extent, like have Jake Gyllenhaal turn out to be Peter's tutor who he's actually known for decades or something. He's just some dude who Peter meets a few times, develops a bit of an attachment to, and then turns out to be a baddie.
Yeah, well, Peter decides that he's the one who should wear the mantle and passes the torch to him, or even convinces himself that Tony wanted him to pass the torch to someone who was worthy of it, which is good because the film is very tight, it's very competent. It's Disney's alarming competence. They didn't do anything that was too complicated. It just really works well. Peter has some angst about being a superhero. Peter doesn't want to be a superhero. He wants to be a kid. Understandable. A guy shows up who's a better superhero. Peter's like, I should give that guy absolute power after a brief chat with him, because you can see exactly where Peter's coming from. He doesn't want the power. He wants to go back to a normal life. Mysterio does want the power, but obviously Mysterio's intentions are not good, and Peter has to then rise to the mantle. I mean, it's a simple, but it's really straightforward and well executed story. There's nothing wasted. It just each point works as they don't overcomplicate it.
Yeah, and as someone who went into it with the pre-existing knowledge that he's pretending to be a new superhero, oh no, he's actually a villain, is one of the big standard Mysterio plots.
Yeah.
I went in there with that pre-knowledge, but I didn't sit there for the whole first half-ish of the film thinking, yes, get to the chorus, come on, get to it, hurry up. It stays very much ahead of my intelligence. I didn't really mind that I had that knowledge because it was playing out at quite a good, natural, decent pace. Like, the bit where I finally started to think, okay, surely we have to reveal he's a villain now, was during the bit when Alistair was just talking about, the bit when Peter is giving him the super weapon. And sure enough, literally minutes later at the end of that scene, Peter leaves the room and then Mysterio reveals himself to be a villain. It was, the film was very much with me. It did that reveal just as I started to think, oh, come on, you can't keep holding on this reveal for much longer.
Possibly the only clunky bit of the film was Jake Gyllenhaal does stand up and do a long monologue basically explaining, and I am actually evil and this is why. I mean, it kind of worked in that it was like, right, we need to do the handbrake turn when he goes from good to evil. We'll just bang through some reasons for him being evil. Understandable ones. He felt underappreciated and shat on by Stark, his erstwhile employer, and things like that. I mean, it was possible a bit exposition-heavy monologue for the audience's benefit, but I don't know, they kind of framed it around the form of him giving a toast to his henchmen, which I guess is an opportunity in real life for someone to monologue. Maybe a little clunky, but then they had to get through that moment and get back to the main plot, so it was probably fine.
Yeah, and it was very entertaining. You know, just on Jake Gyllenhaal's natural movie star charisma, it was an enjoyable few minutes of film, which is all I really ask for my info dumps.
Yeah, and yeah, you're right that Jake Gyllenhaal really sells it, which is great. I mean, it's one of those things that, he's a really good actor. I'm just really not a fan of Donnie Darko. I just found that film was really pretentious. But he's done a lot of good stuff.
I don't think his performance here really has much in common with his performance in Donnie Darko. He basically swings from playing a sort of over-campy, silly, slightly too earnest hero role to playing a slightly over-earnest villain role in a very sort of pivot from positive to negative type way, and it's quite fun.
Yeah.
I like that during some of the early stuff with Mysterio, you know, they've got quite nice special effects in the Marvel Universe at this point, and during some of the early Mysterio fighting the elemental monsters, which, as Alistair sort of implied earlier, surprising no one, are actually fakes generated by Mysterio, which he can then pretend to fight to make himself look cool. But in those sequences, there were a few moments where I thought, you know, for a Marvel film, this looks a bit fake in an effectsy way. Obviously, I don't know if this is actually true or not, but there's an extent to which that, of course, works with the plot, because those actually are special effects.
Yeah, lo and behold.
In story, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. And I did like, once we've got the reveal of the nature of Mysterio's powers, it doesn't then completely neutralise the whole gimmick. Like, there's some really fun sort of Spider-Man fighting illusions stuff in a couple of sequences later on in the film, including one which goes a bit full-on psychedelic, which is quite nice.
Yeah, they saved the special effects budget for that kind of good later fight sequences. Yeah, and I thought Mysterio was quite interesting villain because they try to want to say something about fake news or how reality, shouldn't be trusted. There's a thing, because Mysterio, I guess, he creates fake narratives about him being a hero and having to save the world from an interdimensional threat that obviously is just totally made up, but everyone believes. They're still trying to say something about you shouldn't believe everything you're told, you shouldn't believe everything you see on TV. They kind of patched this up by making MJ a bit of a conspiracy theorist in a way that a lot of teenagers spend too much time on the internet and probably reading a lot of the internet quite uncritically. I don't think they had anything particularly sophisticated to say other than you shouldn't believe everything you read or shouldn't believe everything you see or try to make up your own mind. But there was something there that they were kind of touching on with Mysterio, trying to connect this to broader themes in society, which is, going above and beyond what you expect from a normal summer blockbuster.
Well, yeah, which is actually capped off quite nicely. And this, by the way, we are going into the hard spoiler ending now. I'm literally gonna spoil the mid-credit sequence of the film. So
this is the deep end of spoilers.
This is the deep end of spoilers. So again, if you know what Mysterio is but haven't seen the film yet, then this is your chance to leg it. But otherwise, yeah, the mid-credit sequence has a bit where Mysterio, I think before he dies, I think he's still dead, but it's hard to really tell, has edited together some video clips based on what happened with him and Spider-Man in his last few moments, in which he makes Spider-Man look like a terrorist. And yeah, again, it's a nice final bit of fake news commentary, delivered helpfully by the Daily Bugle, now reimagined as a sort of InfoWars-esque trash website. Still hosted by J. Jonah Jameson, played by J.K. Simmons, which is an amazing shout-out for the hardcore. For those of us who have been saying on the internet for years, I bet the reason they haven't used J. Jonah Jameson since the end of the Baby trilogy is because they could never beat J.K. Simmons in that part. And it turns out, guess not.
I mean, it's great they've got him back because he is brilliant in that role. And I've got a lot of time with J.K. Simmons in everything that he's in.
Yeah, I do kind of hope that this actually leads to a more substantial part in the next film, and we are going full on into the media versus Spider-Man, led by a crusading journo JJJ. I would very much like to see that film, and as I say, I hope that we get to see it and it isn't somehow scuppered by whatever corporate bollocks may or may not happen between Sony and Marvel.
Yeah, we're disappointed they don't do this. I think this film is about to make a bucket load of money, so that probably will smooth things over quite nicely.
Probably, yeah. I'm just still sore after the Marvel Netflix divorce. I'm preparing myself for a Marvel Sony divorce next.
Yeah, I mean, I was reading some box office statistics yesterday, as I do. That's what I do on my Friday. I read box office statistics websites. There's American box office statistics, but I'm pretty sure that the biggest films this year have all been Disney films, and I think the highest grossing films in the cinema have been obviously Endgame and Captain Marvel. So it wouldn't surprise me if Spider-Man Homecoming becomes amongst the highest. I think Toy Story 4 is selling really well as well. There might be something else that I've forgotten.
Aladdin, of course.
Oh, Aladdin, yeah, did actually make loads of money, which are all Disney properties. So it wouldn't surprise me if Spider-Man Far From Home made a lot of money, and that will definitely ease the way to a sequel.
I think Sony have to sort of know that, they're doing quite well out of this Marvel Cinematic Universe collection, and they probably will lose at least some of their precious money if they walk away from it.
Especially with their clever approach to the marketing to ensure that someone from the broader Marvel Cinematic Universe appears on the poster and every bit of marketing for this film and the last film. Like, the last film had Iron Man on every promotional shot and trailer, and this one obviously is Nick Fury. They're really working hard to reassure audiences that this is Spider-Man from the good superhero franchise. This is the Spider-Man you want to see.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like maybe the MCU guesting got a bit much at times. Like, did we really need Nick Fury and, what's his name, Happy Hogan, and Maria Hill hanging around? But, realistically, eventually, even if it isn't before the next film, that Marvel-Sony divorce probably will happen in the end when Sony decide that they've made enough money with the Spider-Verse and the Venom stuff that they could do it by themselves. So, yeah, I should probably just enjoy it while it lasts.
I thought Happy Hogan's is a good character, and
Jon Favreau is just incredibly likeable.
Yeah, because he does comedy as well as serious acting, which really helps.
Yeah, and I like the vibe of, as well as the sort of grounded thing. Yeah, Spider-Man is a kid who lives in the Marvel universe, which is different from just being a kid who lives in the real world. And there's something fun about that as well, especially when you get enjoyable, if slightly ridiculous things like the sequences of them reacting to the impact of the blip. The fact that in order to keep the cast in it at the same age, the main cast had to disappear for 5 years as part of the Endgame plot, but a lot of the rest of them just kept on going.
Yeah. And there's a lot of comedy pratfalls around the blip. Like, there's a great joke when the blip hit Peter's school, which was the school band was playing, and like half the members of the band disappear. But then they show people returning, and it's in the same sports hall for the school, but they're playing basketball when the band is returned. So obviously it's just basketball players running into people playing tubas, which is hilarious. Because they just suddenly appear. Or the school news shows tribute montage to the Avengers who lost their lives in Endgame, complete with the fact that like all the footage is at different resolution, so some of it just looks really, really bad, and they've got the Getty image watermark on some of the footage because they just stole it from the Getty website. Yeah, little things I remember from doing student media. Little jokes like that really brought it to life.
Yeah, as well as all the serious supervillain stuff, there's a good vibe of comedy throughout. So I think they've slightly downplayed the Spider-Man hilariously swings into walls and falls over stuff from the last film, which maybe when I say it's not as good as Homecoming, I just miss seeing Spider-Man falling over. But on the other hand, realistically they've probably only got 1 or 2 movies of this left, and they have to show him growing and maturing and improving at least a little.
Yeah. I felt that MJ was not as funny in this film in the last one. That's probably because they changed her character. In the last film, she was a comedy supporting part. Her character was purely there just to show up, deliver sarcastic one-liners to Peter. It wasn't a particularly complex character, but she was just there to be funny. In this one, they changed her role to being primary love interest, which meant she got to do some more nuanced acting. The woman who plays her, Zendaya, who I think is a graduate of the Disney Mickey Mouse Academy, along with people like Britney Spears, Justin Timberlake, and lots of people over the years. She's very good, but I just felt that I thought the character's got more substance probably in this film. Just wasn't as funny as in the last film, but that's because I guess she was a comedy character in the last film.
Yeah, I did kind of miss the dark jokes, but on the other hand, yeah, I think she got a bit more to do, and she is still, I think, a lot more charismatic and interesting and actually entertaining in her own right than, as I said earlier, a lot of the crappy love interests that some of the lesser Marvel films have had. And yeah, I mean, in general, I probably don't entirely blame them for taking it in a different direction from Homecoming, in that there are quite a few second-in-series Marvel films where they've basically just made more of the same, like, oh, you like the first one, here's some more. the school that brought you Iron Man 2, Thor: The Dark World, kind of Avengers Age of Ultron, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. A lot of these are kind of perceived as being the weaker ones because it often feels like they don't have anything that interesting to say on their own. And I quite like the fact that they actually strained away from it a bit more. Plus, if they're doing their sort of Spider-Man as a teen movie, the teens go on a school trip or the teens go on some sort of big Euro holiday is in its own way another teen movie trope. So
yeah.
I can appreciate them going to a different teen movie trope instead of just making another identical teen movie.
Yeah, no, and I think you're right that they have managed to dodge that sequel fatigue that you sometimes get with these films by coming up with something that's fresh and different, which totally worked here. And and it's good that they're riffing on kind of team rites of passage. I suppose the next one will probably be called like Spider-Man Graduation or something like that, although that wouldn't have home in the title.
Yeah, I think Spider-Man Graduation's probably the right one. I mean, you're going to start running, even though you've written about the blip, you're probably going to start running a bit into, oh dear, all these actors are too old to play teenagers soon enough, so
yeah.
If you want to have them just graduate, then at least, you could either close it off as a trilogy, or you can then make a fourth film about them making their way in the world. Who knows?
Next up, we will be asking Marvel Phase 3, did they nail it? As previously said, this is the final film in the Phase 3 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which includes, among others, Black Panther, Thor Ragnarok, Captain America Civil War, as well as Avengers Infinity War and Endgame. Now it's all over, we can take some time to look back at the entire project. So I'll start by asking Nick, did they nail it?
Well, I think the key point they managed was to pretty much nail the two Avengers films, which is gonna, I think, ensure that this is looked back on as a broadly successful experiment. Like, I'm not saying that those two films are one of our finest examples of the cinematic arts of anything, but they basically work, they're entertaining, and they're not ridiculous monuments to bloated self-indulgence, which frankly is a lot better than a lot of people expected. And therefore, I think most people, when we say, did Marvel Phase 3 work, they'll basically go, yeah, the two Avengers films worked. It also contains Black Panther, Thor Ragnarok, as you say, and two really, really good Spider-Man films. Not every film is a stone cold classic, but having those two Avengers films and a fair few films which arguably are good, great, or possibly even classics, I think makes it a fairly successful venture, yeah. There's a few films that don't work as well. It perhaps started off a little bit shaky. There was, I think, Doctor Strange and Guardians of the Galaxy 2, both of which were seen as low-end good to okay wobbles, and of course Civil War is a bit of a strange beast. But overall, I think it's thanks to the run of form they particularly had in the second half of it. I think Marvel Phase 3 is going to be looked back on as pretty much a success, yeah. They've definitely had a bit of a second Imperial phase in this closing run.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's going to be regarded as overall a successful project. I think it's another testament to Disney's rock-hard competence in that, they've successfully over the last, 5-6 years, not really put a foot majorly wrong in that they can always deliver a film that has, coherent story, some decent emotional bits, some spectacular action, and deliver a reasonable summer blockbuster. There's been lots of people who tried to do similar things, especially big crossover movies, the Avengers films, the Justice League film or Batman vs Superman. Pretty sure both of which came out during the Phase 3 run. They were obviously terrible feats of just over self-indulgence, obscure plotting, and just general dire lack of fun, which is not really what you want from what is ultimately supposed to be summer popcorn entertainment or spring popcorn entertainment, in that it's supposed to be fun and spectacle and engaging. I mean, when they occasionally get the chance to transcend above that with the odd moment like the ending of Guardians Volume 2, which actually has a real sort of heartstrings moment, or the ending of Infinity War. Yeah, there are some moments that generally seem to transcend above being a successful, funny and entertaining action movie. Aside from that, they are just alarmingly competent. I guess the credit should go to the Disney production line of films that ensures that it guarantees a minimum standard of quality.
And I think Marvel themselves must be doing something, because even by, there are other Disney films which are not generally acclaimed as being as fun as these. I mean, Solo, a Star Wars story, was not as fun as even some of the less fully beloved Marvel films.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, as I say, I sort of implied that Guardians 2 is one of the less loved ones, and even that, as you say, has a massive gut punch at the end. And I think, and again, you raised another valid point that the sheer volume of people trying to do this and kind of failing is probably another big testament to how harder than you'd think it apparently is to manage this, especially over the sheer scale that they've managed it.
Yeah, everyone who's tried has pretty much failed. I mean, they're pausing all Star Wars films. I think there's a Star Wars film coming out this year. Then the next one is scheduled for like 2022, and that's going to be another main episode. They're not doing side stories or anything like that anymore. They're just going to do jump forwards to the fourth set of Star Wars trilogies.
So they are finally ending the Skywalker saga, though, aren't they? It's not going to be episode 10.
No, but it'll be a main continuing, then a jump forward. So I guess it'll be, the new films will be set most likely at the time when, like, with Rey and Finn's children, hypothetical children, if they have any. Very little is known about that, but I think the key takeaway from this is that when they were going to be churning out like a Star Wars film a year, or they have been churning out a Star Wars film a year for the last 5 years, they're now going to take a big break on Star Wars. I mean, there's a TV show coming for Disney Plus, so maybe they're going to pivot more towards TV. I mean, I think Disney as a whole is pivoting more towards TV as less people are going to the cinema.
Yeah.
And more people are watching Netflix. I think the point being that the idea for Star Wars to become as much a behemoth franchise as... Well, Star Wars is a behemoth franchise, but it's not an integrated shared universe the way that Marvel is. And it's nothing to do with the fact that Star Wars doesn't have a rich history, lots of stories or characters to draw on, or a shortage of people who really want to tell stories in that universe. For whatever reason, the leadership, the creative decisions, it just didn't work. Speaking as someone who liked, especially Force Awakens and Last Jedi were very good.
And Rogue One.
And Rogue One was good as well. And obviously, on top of this, the less said about the DC Cinematic Universe, the better.
I think the good thing about them sort of nailing the broader superstructure of the Marvel Phase 3 Cinematic Universe, whatever, is even the few films which didn't work and take their place in the firmament as stone cold classics have still done their bit to build towards the whole. And you end up kind of liking them as part of the universe, even if you didn't, like, mega love those films. Like, I didn't think Captain Marvel, Ant-Man and the Wasp, or Doctor Strange were, like, amazing, although they're all some level of sort of good to decent. But their roles in later films, and the fact that I fully expect them to improve over the course of their franchises, means I still have a sort of residual liking towards them. I mean, Doctor Strange and Ant-Man both had a lot of really good bits in Endgame. You know, I still like those characters, and I still like those actors, even if I didn't think those films were amazing. It's a nice, I don't know, I guess it's a nice example of the way the Marvel shared universe seems to actually enhance stuff instead of taking away from it, which is impressive.
Yeah, exactly. I think also what they did in Phase 3 that worked well is that they introduced like some new characters, especially as obviously this is the last films most likely for Iron Man, Captain America and Thor, the original trio that the franchise was built around. And now they're retiring, but they have successfully brought through new characters. I mean, one of my criticisms, I think, of Phase 2 was that it was quite safe in that they didn't really launch many new characters. They did Guardians of the Galaxy, which was good, and I really liked it, and they did introduce new characters. And they had Ant-Man as well, but that was kind of tucked on the end after Age of Ultron. But this time they really made the effort to bring in and broaden the universe out and introduce lots of new characters, which is risky because are people going to like them? And also, as we said before in this podcast, that introducing new solo films can be difficult because you have to introduce a lot of stuff. That's why a lot of times the first ones can be a bit weak because they have to introduce loads of things. Second ones can be better. But some of it they handled very well, like introducing Black Panther in Civil War meant that the Black Panther film could just hit the ground running, and it's absolutely excellent. And like, even though Doctor Strange, it was all right. It was, I liked it. I thought, yeah, like, as you say, like, kind of okay to good rather than good to great, like a lot of the others are. But have set up that character now, and then so with the sequel, they've got ground to build on.
There's an extent to which, they've built to it as this is now, going to be a massive ongoing thing. This can become an empire to blot out the sun, rather than just, be reliant on, oh dear, what the fuck's going to happen when Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans finally leave. Impressively, we are now here at the end of Phase 3. Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans have successfully buggered off. And I don't think anyone's sitting here going, well, they're fucks then. I think everyone's relatively sure that they'll probably manage something.
Yeah.
Whereas, I don't know. I mean, I guess things were starting to ramp up in terms of, introducing, like, Guardians in Phase 2. I think there was still an extent, a degree to which people were thinking, okay, what are they going to do when some of these main actors start leaving? I mean, I am, interested to see what new things they've still got to introduce. On a lot of other podcasts I listen to, there is some gentle, I don't know if doubt is the right word, but gentle mockery of the fact that their big launch for Phase 4 that they've announced so far appears to be The Eternals, which is a bit of a deep dive into the Marvel catalogue. Like, they are starting to run out of, like, major characters who they haven't done either on TV or in a film. I mean, if they really want to fill out the universe, I suppose they could just start filming some of the characters they've already televised. Like, maybe they'll just finally cut the cord between the TV and film universes and just make a Daredevil film and flat out pretend the TV show never happened.
I can imagine a Daredevil film was probably quite high on the list. But then based on what you said, I mean, I've never heard of the Eternals, but I hadn't heard of Doctor Strange before his film was coming along. And was only vaguely aware of like Black Panther or Ant-Man. So I think for a lot of the lay audience, I mean, if you're the priest and then everyone else, I guess, who doesn't read comics is the lay audience of the Church of Marvel. For a lot of the lay audience, they don't need to be au fait with the characters. They can be introduced subtly through other films, trailers, and internet content, like they successfully did with, Ant-Man, Doctor Strange, Black Panther, so maybe they can do the same for the Eternals. I mean, obviously nothing lasts forever. Eventually they're going to get this wrong, but...
Well, yeah, I mean, the Eternals are basically huge cosmic godlike beings, a bit like Thor's Asgard, only kind of more so. It'll be interesting to see how they end up playing that. But there is a rumour they might have got Angelina Jolie for that, which is impressive.
Yeah, that would be good.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I have a certain amount of faith that they'll manage something, or at the very least they'll try something interesting. And there's plenty of, I mean, cleverly at this point, enough of the new stuff they've tried has landed. But I imagine people are excited enough for, another Black Panther film, or another Captain Marvel film, or the possibility of another Taika Waititi 4 film, or the third Spider-Man Tom Holland film, that even if whatever new thing they try crashes into the ground and eats dirt, they can probably move past it.
Yeah.
At this point, they've got a fairly deep bench of stuff people like.
Yeah, exactly. And also they've successfully learned the lesson that it's good to keep moving and keep introducing new things. So maybe at the end of phase 4 will be like, well, the granddaddies of the franchise are your Captain Marvels, your Black Panthers, and now they're bringing up... They'll be elevating a new phase of fresh talent. The main thing, obviously, is they've got some X-Men probably turning up at some point, which hopefully will breathe some new life into the franchise.
It's true, actually. Once we get to phase whatever the X-Men are, I guess maybe that'll be phase 5 at this point, or the very end of phase 4.
Should be phase X.
If they can keep it going till phase 10 before introducing the X-Men, that would obviously be best, but that might take a while. I mean, I don't know whether we're going to see the continuation of phase numbers. I've not actually seen people, like official Marvel sources, mention phase 4 explicitly, so I don't know whether maybe, to an extent, the end of the Infinity War Endgame arc might be them doing away with the concept of phases and just trying to chill out a bit and be a bit, no, we're just going to put out films now. Like a company that puts out films. I don't know. I'll be interested to see if they bother to frame whatever comes next as phases.
They firmly established the broad structure of this all in the minds of cinema audiences. So they don't need Avengers films to kind of bookend phases and give the whole thing structure. They can now just bring out films in the cinematic universe indefinitely, which I think would be a better strategy, because they should keep moving and keep changing as what they do, because if they keep doing the same thing over and over, eventually it makes it easier for people to say this is becoming tired and generic.
Well, yeah, I think a lot of what Star Wars, as you were talking about earlier, did wrong is that a lot of the films they made, certainly a lot of the non-Skywalker saga episode ones, were a bit over-concerned with examining the history of the franchise in interminable fucking detail. I mean, as luck would have it, Rogue One was good, but I just don't think the appetite for prequel material is there to the extent that whoever's in charge in Star Wars land seems to think it is. I think that might be one aspect of stuff that there might be sub-audience for in the hardcore fandom, but I honestly think the general audience just doesn't give a shit.
Yeah, exactly. Which Marvel have cleverly learned about, so they're not diving too much into the past. They're keeping it focused on the future, new talent, new things.
Yeah.
What makes you excited about a new Marvel film is something new. Crucial word there, new. Is what gets you excited about a new Star Wars film the fact, like, ooh, we get to find about how the rebels stole the Death Star plans, or how Han Solo became a smuggler. It's not that exciting. And like I say, what is exciting about Star Wars is the new stuff. Like, now we get to find out what happens to the Empire after the death of the Emperor. At least that's new.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think I'm trying to run back over my memory of past Marvel stuff to see if anyone's going to aggressively prove me wrong. Right? They've barely done anything you could even charitably refer to as a prequel. Well, I suppose Captain America: The First Avenger took place before films that had already come out, but it was introducing that character. It wasn't, going back and prequeling him. Everything since First Avenger has come out after it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and the same with Captain Marvel. It's set in the past, but
it's new material. It's not. I mean, I suppose they could have brought in Captain Marvel in the present day and then gone back and prequeled her, but I think somewhat sensibly, even that they've decided is too much like a prequel, and let's not do prequels because they suck. And I don't fully disagree with that assessment. Or at least I think they're very hard to pull off.
Yeah, we did a whole episode on the problems with prequels. So I think, and that was for our review of Solo: A Star Wars Story. So that's
yeah. So let's not rehash ourselves too much.
Yeah, and they do something with each Marvel film that makes them have their own sort of take on them a bit. So, like, Captain Marvel, it was set in the 90s. I mean, that's just a bit different. We have a younger Samuel L. Jackson. I mean, they're keeping them fresh by doing something like that. Black Panther had a very distinct, interesting visual style that really wove Afrofuturism through into everything, like the costume design, the plot, the music. They've given each one like a little bit of personality. Like, it's about as much personality as a summer superhero really gets. I mean, it's not like a fully formed three-dimensional personality, but they've got enough personality to make them engaging and memorable, and which is what you need, I think.
And also, yeah, from a brand perspective, it's a lot about getting you attached to the characters. I mean, they try to make the films distinct, but there is sometimes a certain sameness to them, especially like visually, I suppose. A lot of these films do look very similar. Especially, one of the things that does sometimes strike you when watching some of the newer, slightly better DC films is that the directors seem to be allowed to take a few more risks than you sometimes feel like the Marvel directors are. Like Aquaman, for all that you could laugh at Aquaman because he's an underwater man who talks to fish, his film did have a bit more visual flair than most Marvel films do.
Yeah.
As we move into a future which may not be quite as defined by phases and uber corporate strategy, maybe they'll start loosening the reins on that. I don't know. Surely someone in a meeting somewhere, if I'm smart enough to notice it, then surely someone in a meeting somewhere has gone, is this something that DC will have over on us? Should we maybe let the directors off the hook a bit?
Yeah, I mean, they do a good job of bringing through like independent directors. The two people who directed Captain Marvel had done like independent films before that. There's a podcast I listen to that dives much more into art house and independent cinema, and they were interviewing this German person who directed a film, who's like becoming a successful indie director. And one of the questions they asked was, "Aren't you the sort of person who gets poached by Marvel to do a franchise? You're an established independent filmmaker. You're the sort of person they bring on as a safe pair of hands to handle a new character." And the person was like, "Yeah, well, if Marvel want to hire me, that's okay, but having fun making indie films." So it's become a thing amongst fans of indie cinema that you do something interesting, you might get poached from Marvel to bring that little bit of personality to a Marvel film, so you don't have just someone from the Disney production line of directors.
Well, yeah, and obviously they've had a few big good gets, bringing through like James Gunn, Taika Waititi and Ryan Coogler, who were well received, up and coming, but haven't quite yet done a huge blockbuster, and being the people to bring them through.
Yeah, Ryan Coogler especially was a good get. Just Creed is very good. I haven't seen the sequel, but Creed is certainly really worth watching.
I think it went up on Netflix the other day, if that helps you.
Oh, that's good.
I mean, but actually, the Black Widow film, it occurs to me, is possibly the closest thing they've done to a prequel, because it's going to have Scarlett Johansson in it, and, spoilers lads, that character is dead. So,
yeah,
unless there's a twist coming about the deadness of that character, which I suppose she is a spy, but it would cheapen the moment a bit, then it looks like that will probably be some sort of... I'm guessing it'll be a torch-passing film in which the past Scarlett Johansson recruits and unleashes a new Black Widow or something. That is what I sort of imagine, but it'll be interesting to see them at least dip a toe into prequel territory.
Well, that would be different. And I guess doing a spy film also would be different to what they've done before, so it's keeping with the phase of differences. One of the things is that although they've had some bum notes along the way, or at least not as... What's the opposite of a bum note? I don't know. They haven't had some notes that have quite sung...
A face note?
A face note, yeah. Some films, like say, like Doctor Strange haven't quite, sparkled in the way that, like, I don't know, Thor Ragnarok did. But sometimes when you go to see, like, other franchises that aren't Marvel films, you kind of do appreciate sometimes, like, how competent they are. Like, recently I went to see Men in Black International, which has been given universal kicking. I don't think it's as bad as everyone says it is. It's certainly not as bad as Dark Phoenix, but it's kind of just a bit bland, and like it's got a few jokes but not really enough good jokes, and there's some action but it's not really anything amazing. It's just a bit kind of, that was a film, it'll probably be forgotten quite quickly. And it makes you think that, like, well, at least Doctor Strange is better than that. Doctor Strange has some memorability and some personality. It doesn't fire on all cylinders. But, it's got something that made you, when you left the cinema, thinking, yeah, I paid my £7-8 and was entertained for just shy of 2 hours. I think that's a worthy exchange of my labour for something to make me forget about my life. Whereas when I left...
Whereas I sat there watching Men in Black, thinking about my job the entire time.
Well, exactly. It's one of my criteria actually for a film.
Did I at any point think about the emails I've got to send tomorrow?
Well, yeah, it is one of those things. If I find my mind wandering to, like, I think when we did our review of Dark Phoenix, where they mentioned this at the time, which is that, like, during Dark Phoenix, I spent my time thinking a lot about, I got a Wetherspoons after this. What kind of burger should I have? Drive-through burger's pretty good. Haven't had an ultimate burger in a while. Maybe chicken burger? I mean, it's silly, but that's kind of a watermark for a film in that it's not holding my attention.
Yeah.
And Spider-Man Far From Home, like, again, the whole time, similar slot, Friday night, after work, before dinner. So I could have been thinking about food, but I wasn't. I was watching the film. I'm a simple soul on some level. but
we're the voice of the people, Alistair.
The voice of the people. Like, was this film worthy of me skipping dinner? But yeah, I felt that, like, when you're watching something that is, like, even though not, like, offensively bad, as, like, Batman v Superman or, like, Baywatch, the movie it was. Baywatch, the movie, I wasn't thinking about my dinner. I was just thinking about, like, my God, why did I decide to go see this? Even though it's got The Rock in it, it's awful. But yeah, I think when you go to these films that just aren't that good and aren't really holding your attention, and you feel like your mind wandering and you're just kind of a bit bored, you kind of really appreciate a film like Doctor Strange, which it's like, it's not brilliant, it has flaws, but it's not boring.
Yeah, and I know that there's a lot of counter theories about how we probably shouldn't laud Disney with endless rewards and total cultural dominance because they've achieved, probably ultimately they've got the spare money and have worked out how to use it successfully to reliably create decent films. But yeah, I cannot deny that whatever they're doing is working pretty well. Because yeah, I think even the Doctor Stranges and... I mean, yeah, that's the best part about this whole phase. I have to actually think for a few minutes of what the second worst one is meant to be. I guess it's probably Ant-Man and the Wasp, but that's actually quite a nice, charming film, even if it is also just maybe a bit kind of forgettable.
Exactly. The worst thing you say about something is it's forgettable, especially it's forgettable when put in the same company as Spider-Man Homecoming or Black Panther or, Avengers Endgame.
Yeah, and again, the impressive part about Phase 3 is that there's a lot of films just loose in the middle of it, which are not just good, but great.
Yeah, like Black Panther, like, really nailed it.
Black Panther and Ragnarok, and I may be more a sucker for these than some people, but I really love those Spider-Man films, man.
I mean, we've talked before about the Malcolm Gladwell mustard and ketchup theory, successfully applied to Marvel films by Helen Lewis in her review of Doctor Strange, ironically, which is to say that, like, there's a formula of humour and action that hits all of your cinematic taste buds that you don't get bored of and you keep coming back for, and Disney have successfully managed to package that and sell it, which is why they are dominant, and that's why ketchup's dominant, because ketchup does this same thing for food. And if you've got more unusual tastes, like you prefer mustard, then there are other things out there. Yeah, like I say, I like independent cinema, it's a different taste, but for a mainstream taste that you're not going to get tired of going back for over and over again, you can't beat this Disney formula.
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, after 3 solid podcast episodes talking about Marvel Disney products, I am officially ready to talk about something else. Even I, the slightly harder Marvel Disney fan section of the podcast. But yes, they've clearly got something.
Yeah.
The cinematic ketchup of it all.
I mean, it's hard to imagine how they could be more successful. I mean, Avengers Endgame is the second highest grossing film of all time. It's really trying hard to elbow Avatar off the top of the chart. That's why I think they've re-released it with extra footage.
Yeah, at this point they are, on a sort of cosmic movie gross scale, alarmingly close to elbowing Avatar out the way. I can see why they took a punt on that re-release, because at this point I'm sure it will be quite frustrating for them if they make 2,760 million, but don't quite make the extra 20 million they need to get past Avatar.
Yeah, something to get the hardcore fans back, because at this point everyone who's going to see Endgame has probably seen it.
As I say, it's definitely a bit of a second, even more imperial phase for them, and I look forward to seeing if they manage to somehow trip over it and go on the wane a bit. The sheer amount of time that they've been the dominant cultural force for is stunningly impressive, so I sort of assume at some point they have to stumble over their own feet, or people just have to get bored of it.
Well, as I said in my summary of 2018, nothing lasts forever, and although this mode of filmmaking is completely dominant, it won't continue forever. And I think, as I said in the last episode, inevitably they will make a bad film. That film is probably going to get absolutely savage reviews because people enjoy it when the king falters. The moment of "you are human." Like I say, just as how people turned on the Beatles relatively quickly when they started making stuff that was still pretty good, but just kind of a bit missing the mark or whatever. It will happen. It's going to be interesting when it does.
And who knows, maybe it'll be soon enough that this podcast will still be going. Okay, thank you very much for listening to our epic trilogy of Marvel coverage. If you want to see more of us, including more of us talking about Marvel Disney products, you can go to moderatefantasyviolence.com and download past episodes, deleted scenes, essays, all sorts of Marvel Disney sponsored crap. And if you enjoy all that, you can go to iTunes or your podcast host thing of choice and leave us a nice review. Thank you.
You can also follow us on Twitter, where we're at MFV Podcast, and you can find us on Facebook by searching for Moderate Fantasy Violence, and you'll see our lovely purple logo. You can also find me on Twitter, where I'm at Alistair J.R. Ball, and you can find more of my writing at redtrainblog.com.
And I've been Nick Bryan. You can find me online at nickbryan.com, on Twitter at @nickmb, and please do not forget to buy my comics and also a nice pair of underpants with Mickey Mouse on them. With that, the Marvel coverage finally comes to an end, for now. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time with Season 2 of Killing Eve. See you then. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Anyway, cool. Let's now not talk about Marvel for 5 minutes. At least a couple of episodes, maybe. At least until Legion finishes. Anyway, for God's sake, let's stop.